Complaint against Vancouver police officers David Waterfield, number 3140, and Keith Blin, 2428. Sergeant David Waterfield works for the Vancouver Police Sex Crimes Unit, as does Sergeant Keith Blin. My complaint is against these two officers for not investigating a brutal and violent sexual assault rape. I witnessed and reported to them, in which the victim was a child and the perpetrator was a grown man. I knew both the victim and the perpetrator. In 2025, I gave a second statement of fact regarding the sexual assault I witnessed via phone call with David Waterfield and Keith Blin. This was my second attempt at having an investigation regarding this sexual assault after my first attempt was ignored by Sergeant Stephen Jackal and Sergeant David Gibson of the Vancouver Police. I later discovered Jackal and Gibson had taken instruction from William Strickland of the BC government's MCFD to ignore my evidence and statement of facts and not investigate the crime. Here is a quick summary of who the dubious William Strickland is. William Strickland is an employee of the British Columbia MCFD, who was a central figure in a high-profile child sexual abuse court case that made the news. Strickland held untold amounts of power from his position within government. BC Supreme Court Judge Paul Walker found that Mr. Strickland had committed misfeasance while in public office. William Strickland had instructed Vancouver police officer Sgt Pollard to ignore a child rape report, and Sgt Pollard did as instructed by William Strickland without question. The children continued to be sexually abused because of these two men insulating the rapist. The case sparked public outcry and drew criticism from the former BC child advocate and NDP leaders at the time regarding the ministry's handling of the situation and its subsequent soft treatment of Strickland. Strickland was still employed by the ministry after the court case and was quietly shuffled to Port Hardy, British Columbia. Someone within government approved that William Strickland's name be removed from the public database and only be viewable on the internal database that is not available to news media or researchers. Evidence has surfaced of this fact that the BC government has made the choice to double down on corruption as opposed to transparency and repairing the issue of insulating sexual abusers from investigation. The BC government have refused to say who Strickland's boss was and why he was not investigated and fired for aiding a rapist, and instructing Vancouver police officer Sgt Pollard to ignore the rape report. After FOI documents revealed this same government employee named William Strickland had also instructed Sergeant Jackal and Gibson to ignore my rape report. I reached out to the Vancouver police to find out why they took direction from William Strickland, but the Vancouver police just ignored me. I then filed a complaint with the OPCC. Soon after the OPCC whitewashed my complaint, Jackal was quickly retired and Sergeant Gibson was shuffled out of the Vancouver Police Department. Unfortunately, the OPCC deemed my complaint inadmissible and my complaint was tossed in the garbage. What this means is that the OPCC refused to open a file on Strickland, Jackal, or Gibson. The OPCC used a formula that is very commonly used to whitewash complaints against police officers, in that the OPCC waited many months to stall out the clock. After a few months, with the OPCC not making any contact with me and not asking a single follow-up question regarding my complaint, I received a phone call out of the blue. The OPCC double-talked and danced around my questions and finally admitted no investigation was done. Not a single follow-up question was attempted, and my complaint against Jackal and Gibson for not investigating the rape I witnessed was tossed in the garbage and being deemed inadmissible. This means that no paper trail of my complaint existed because no acknowledgement of my complaint existed, and the phone call was further sneakiness by the OPCC to sidestep creating a paper trail that would be tied to Strickland, Gibson, or Jackal. Fortunately, I had recorded my phone call with the OPCC and sent it to news media, the Vancouver Police, and other watchdogs. Soon after, the Vancouver Police opened the file again and gave my rape report a new file number. Sex Crimes Police officers David Waterfield and Keith Blin contacted me and took my statement. This time Waterfield and Blin recorded my statement. Years had gone by since I had first reported the rape, but I was hopeful forward movement was taking place. I kept in touch with Waterfield via email and phone calls and provided 2 recorded pieces of evidence. One of the recordings was of me being threatened by a family member told not go to police. The evidence included a conversation with me and the first person I had told the next day after witnessing the rape. The recording included this person poo-pooing the rape and saying, "Why are you making such a big deal of it, the rape? It happens in Cub Scouts and hockey all the time." Some time went by and neither Waterfield or Blin asked any questions. This seemed remarkable and similar to the first so-called investigation by Jackal and Gibson in that no questions were asked regarding details of my evidence or statement. I contacted Waterfield and was told by him that he had made contact with the victim, and the victim did not want to talk about the sexual assault. Waterfield went into detail about victims often just want to get on with their life and want to forget about being sexually assaulted. I said I understand and asked Waterfield if he had made contact with the person that had threatened me and if he had made contact with the alleged perpetrator. I explained that a lawyer named Kovacs that was married to a BC provincial judge had told me that it is vital to let pedophiles know they are under the microscope, as a way to help deter them. I explained what I was told, that sunlight is an effective disinfectant and a way to potentially protect potential future victims. Waterfield told me that he was not able to legally disclose if he communicated with the recorded witness that threatened me or the alleged rapist, but assured me that he had made contact with the alleged victim. I found this odd that he could tell me he contacted the victim, but could not tell me more regarding others. At the time I understood that maybe Waterfield was going above the rules to show me he was actually investigating the rape, unlike his predecessors Jackal and Gibson. Waterfield assured me the case was still ongoing. Time went by, and still Waterfield and Blin had not asked me a single question regarding my evidence that now included a second recording of the perpetrator's ex-partner believing that there were more child victims out there. This newest evidence further showed that the perpetrator had killed a pedestrian in a crosswalk late one evening while he was high on drugs. It seemed remarkable that both past and present recordings and evidence still did not prompt either Waterfield and Blin to ask me a single question regarding the complexities and layers to this rape case. The recordings and historic court documents also showed the alleged perpetrator had a violent history, besides getting away with killing a man with his truck while high on drugs. I did not alert the perp's ex-partner of who the child victim was, but she did explain to me that she lived in fear and was regularly beaten up by him to the point of being unconscious. She also explained to me of the disturbing, deviant sexual behavior during their marriage. I eventually decided to contact Waterfield and ask for an update and to see if he had any questions regarding the mounting evidence. It was at this time that my suspicions that no investigation took place was confirmed, and these 2 officers were just burning up the clock. In an email response from Sergeant Keith Blin, he says that Inspector David Waterfield left a phone message for the alleged child rape victim, and the victim did not call back, so they closed the case. This admission is in complete contrast to what Inspector Waterfield had told me when he told me that he had personally talked to the alleged child rape victim. The reader of my complaint here should be shocked that a police officer would leave a phone message when attempting to contact a victim, and give up when they don't reply. I personally don't believe any attempt of investigation was done, and that these 2 officers are still taking direction from the legacy of the dubious government employee named William Strickland. Of note is a cryptic FOI document that suggests a Catholic connection. Another recent documented recorded conversation I had with Sergeant Jared Sadu, badge number 3001, in late 2025 has alerted me that a note is on my police file highlighting the fact that I filed the complaint with the OPCC against Jackal and Gibson, and this note prompted Sadu to act both hostile and unprofessional toward me. I will write out that complaint and file it ASAP, because Sadu has a documented history of violence against the public and was criminally convicted in 2018 for assault with a weapon while employed with Vancouver police. Also, of note to the reader of my complaint is that Sergeant Stephen Jackal, who was the first officer I reported the rape to, was the officer in charge of the Vancouver police officers that beat Miles Gray to death in 2015 in Burnaby, BC. I ask the reader to take special note that 2 officers involved in my case have a history of extreme violence, and that Miles Gray was beaten to death by Vancouver police outside the jurisdiction of the Vancouver police. I see no reason that Vancouver would lower themselves to beat me to death for filing complaints against them when they have high-priced lawyers to put up endless hurdles. But my trust in Vancouver police has diminished greatly. Please see Blin's email below that was copied and pasted from my email account. Kind regards, redacted name February 5th, 2026. Good afternoon. I have been working with Detective Waterfield as a supervisor in the Sex Crimes Unit, and I oversaw his investigation. Detective Waterfield and I have had several investigative briefings, and we discussed the legalities and challenges involved. On May 15, 2024, Detective Waterfield concluded the investigation as the identified victim had not responded to multiple contact attempts. Given the circumstances, I am in agreement with his decision to conclude. Should the victim reach out and choose to participate in an investigation, the file can be reopened and the investigation can resume. I have advised Detective Waterfield that we will not be conducting a wellness check on your sons in relation to file 24 to 66,871, which was the report you submitted to him on April 17, 2024. If you have reason to be concerned for the safety and well-being of your sons, I encourage you to call 911 for immediate assistance, or you can call 604-717-3321 for non-emergency help. If you have any questions or concerns regarding 24 to 66,871 moving forward, please reach out to me rather than Detective Waterfield. Thank you, Keith Bill, Sergeant 2428, Vancouver Police Department. Special Investigation Section 604-717-9479 Keith. Bill at VPD. CA.